Well, here we go, true believers. After the recent mega casting announcement, we are now officially on the highway to Avengers Doomsday's release on May 1st, 2026. 27 names were shown on the back of 27 chairs, over what felt like 27 hours, and there's sure to be more to come too, but how is the roster looking so far? I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here is every confirmed Avengers Doomsday character and their story so far. Number 24. Thor. Little rhyme. The Avengers have been scattered ever since the multiverse saga began, pretty much all going their separate ways after the Battle of Earth against Thanos, of course played by Josh Brolin, and it seems as though not many are returning to fight Doom. Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, is one of only 3 official Avengers confirmed to appear in the next Avengers movie so far. The God of Thunder's last involvement in the MCU came with Thor: Love and Thunder, the woefully underwhelming follow-up to Thor: Ragnarok. More mystical journeys across the cosmos were essentially just another week for Thor, though he did come out of it in a very different place. In fact, the character may not be coming to Doomsday alone, as the post-credit scene of Love and Thunder saw him teaching his new adoptive daughter Love, played by Chris Hemsworth's own daughter India, the ways of fighting. Unless Brett Goldstein is going to appear, chances are the setup for Thor vs. Hercules will be completely ignored, and the demigod will return to Earth with his daughter looking for a fight. As potentially the only OG Avenger involved, unless Hawkeye or maybe the Hulk show up, Thor will be an integral part of the story, and will, as always, be one of the heaviest hitting weapons our heroes have in their arsenal. Number 23. Sam Wilson, aka Captain America. Doomsday is set to be the first Avengers film not to feature Chris Evans' Steve Rogers, at least officially so far. You know how the rumor mill be, but it will still boast Captain America. The famous shield was passed on to Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson in the final moments of Avengers Endgame, and he has since featured in 2 of his own stories: Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney+, and the recently released and much maligned Captain America: Brave New World. After battling with the decision throughout Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam finally became Captain America, and with Brave New World now under his belt as his first solo movie, he is fully solidified in the role and ready to lead Earth's mightiest heroes. The Eternals asked the question of who would lead the team in the wake of Steve Rogers' absence, and it has since become clear ever since that Sam Wilson is the one to do it. Okay, maybe it should have been Bucky because come on, but hey, in Sam's defense, he does have the ability to inspire people, and he is very clearly a natural leader, so Earth's mightiest heroes are in good hands with him. As said before, there are only 3 official Avengers so far on the Doomsday list, so he has some recruiting to do, but he has already made a start. Number 22. Bucky Barnes. Sebastian Stan's Bucky Barnes has been on one hell of a journey since his debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe 14 years ago. He has gone from sidekick to villain to complicated anti-hero. He has died and come back to life, completely reformed and left the Winter Soldier behind, and has eventually even campaigned to become a government official. After having a brief cameo in Captain America: Brave New World, Bucky will return again to the big screen in 2025 as part of the Thunderbolts, a Marvel movie that I'm actually personally pretty excited for. In that, he is one of a handful of names on this list that have certain questions hovering over them when it comes to their role in Doomsday. Namely, no one knows how things are going to look like by the time that Thunderbolts' post-credit sting has finally finished. Bucky will be alive, at least, which is likely more than can be said of Taskmaster, played by Olga Kurylenko, the sole Thunderbolt who was not part of the Doomsday casting announcement, so, yeah. Since receiving the shield from Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson has leaned on Bucky quite a bit, with the former Winter Soldier's faith in Steve's decision being pretty unwavering. This may not be a conversation either of them need to have again in Doomsday, though leading the Avengers will certainly be a step up for Captain America. Bucky likely won't be far from his friend's side. Number 21. Shuri. Following the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman in 2020, Ryan Coogler and Marvel Studios had a tough decision to make surrounding the future of the Black Panther in the MCU. There was never any question of recasting T'Challa, and in 2022, Shuri stepped into the role of the legendary Wakandan warrior. While there is certainly inspiration taken from T'Challa in her Black Panther, they are not the same. There is more than a little bit of fire in her, as proven by Killmonger on the astral plane. Though T'Challa was never officially an Avenger, as he was almost thrown into the ring with them by happenstance during Civil War, he supported and helped the team throughout Infinity War and was obviously a fixture in the finale of Endgame. One would assume that a similar dynamic will be in place with Shuri in Doomsday. Letitia Wright's character will not be the only Wakandan to appear in the 5th Avengers film though, and so it would be fair to assume that audiences will see the magical and once reclusive nation of Wakanda on the big screen once again. Number 20, Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man. 5 years after the Avengers were defeated at the hands of Thanos, their fight was over. The team still carried on as the world still spun, but there was no thought to try and change what had happened. That was until Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, returned from the quantum realm with a plan. To go inside Thanos's... Okay, no, that definitely wasn't the plan. Ant-Man brought the Avengers into the fight in Endgame, and chances are it was going to be a similar situation when Doomsday was instead going to be the Kang Dynasty. Lang has just tussled with and defeated one version of Kang in the quantum realm, and he knew that there were more on the way. Obviously, this is no longer the case. Kang is done in the MCU in the wake of Jonathan Majors' fall from grace, and Doomsday is here, leaving Ant-Man's role a little less clear. He is still one of the mere 3 official Avengers so far confirmed in Doomsday's cast, along with Thor and Captain America, and that is certainly nothing to ignore. However, with an entire trilogy under his belt already, it does feel like Lang is coming towards the end of his time in the franchise. And with death almost certainly on the horizon for someone in this film, Scott may be up there with the favorites. Tough break, buddy. Number 19, John Walker, aka US Agent. Wyatt Russell's John Walker did something that few other characters could have achieved when he was introduced to the MCU back in 2021. After Sam had given the Captain America shield to a museum, the government passed it on to John Walker, and in mere seconds of screen time at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier's first episode, he was universally despised. Not because he was a bad character, but rather that he was just so convincingly bad. He doubled down on this throughout the series, showing that he was everything that Steve Rogers was not as Captain America. Arrogant, entitled, and violent, John was in the role only because of his blonde hair and blue eyes, and it showed. He is so far one of the handful of characters to have interacted with Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, as she brought him into her Thunderbolts team as a US agent, but there is more than enough chance of redemption throughout the film. He does have a stellar military career, and so, with that attitude, he could be a strong leader for the team, so long as he and Bucky can keep their differences out of the equation. He will be integral to whatever the Thunderbolts are doing come Doomsday. Also, it's worth noting, I have invested heavily in Wyatt Russell stock since the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, so I'm personally just really pumped he's getting more time to shine. Number 18, Namor. Namor is one of those Marvel Comics characters that fans had been clamoring to see on the big screen for years. They finally got their wish in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, as the legendary rivalry between Wakanda and Talokan, Atlantis in the comics, was kicked off. The King of Talokan is a monarch by name, but his people view him as more of a god than anything else. Super strength, the ability to fly thanks to the wings on his ankles, and access to as much vibranium as the Wakandans, Namor and his army are to be taken seriously, no matter the foe. At the end of Wakanda Forever, Shuri spared the life of Namor with a view to working together rather than destroying each other. A tentative alliance, to be sure, and one that may or may not hold up through Doomsday to Black Panther 3, but is likely to at least still be intact come 2026. Namor has been a hero, a villain, and an anti-hero throughout his run in the comics since debuting in 1939, and could reasonably play any of these roles in his MCU future. In such a crowded space as this film though, any conflict between him and Shuri is likely to be left until the 3rd Black Panther film at least. Number 17, Shang-Chi. It would be remiss when talking about the MCU drop-off post-Endgame if Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was not mentioned as an exception. Unsurprisingly, people have been waiting with bated breath for news surrounding a sequel, or at the very least, the character's return. Appearing in an Old West-themed episode of What If just wasn't enough, and thankfully, audiences now have confirmation of his return. After battling against his father and getting the legendary Ten Rings himself, Simu Liu's Shang-Chi was summoned by Wong at the end of his first solo film. There, he met with Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers to discuss the artifacts in question. Now, there are two major things to take from this meeting. First is that there is still seemingly some semblance of an Avengers team for Sam Wilson to build from, even if it is only Wong, Carol, and Bruce. The second is that Shang-Chi could cause Doom some real trouble. Number 16, Yelena Belova. Yelena Belova has so far appeared in just 2 MCU projects, and stole the show in both of them. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Natasha Romanoff in Black Widow and never for a second looked out of place. And in her limited screen time in Hawkeye on Disney+, she was easily one of the best parts of an already strong series. Florence Pugh is an outstanding talent, and brings to the character intensity, vulnerability, and that classic trademark MCU humor. Though with Yelena, this never feels forced or out of place. She's one of the biggest assets Marvel Studios can boast in what has been an incredibly fallow period. And it's safe to assume that once again she will shine in Thunderbolts, as a likely reluctant team member before becoming something of a reluctant team leader. There are a lot of parallels between Yelena and Natasha, and the younger sister could well play a similar role as the elder did with the original Avengers come Doomsday. Number 15, Beast. It feels like a bigger deal should have been made about Beast's return to Marvel screens in 2023. The Marvels was met with a muted reception, but come on. Kelsey Grammer is always worth celebrating, even if he isn't in the actual Beast makeup anymore. Of course, there are more X-Men to come on this list, but here is where the bridge between the X-Men's universe and Earth 616 does not feel good calling it that, but yeah, there are a lot of connections that can be made. At the end of the Marvels, Monica Rambeau, played by Tiona Paris, found herself on the wrong side of a rip in space-time, and ultimately in a different universe parallel to her own. Not only was this a reality where her mum was alive and well, and a superhero to boot, she was also welcomed by Hank McCoy. Hank name-dropped the leader of the X-Men, again, more on him soon, marking the most significant mutant appearance in the MCU to date. Currently, there is no telling which version of the X-Men Doomsday will bring to the table, but Beast might be the most exciting inclusion yet, just so long as they get that CG right. Number 14, Sentry. In the build-up to Avengers Infinity War, Captain America Civil War was used to drive a stake into the team that was Earth's mightiest heroes, leaving their alliance shattered. When Thanos came, Earth needed the Avengers more than ever. They were broken. Similarly here, in the build-up to Doomsday, Thunderbolts appears to be driving home the point that the Avengers aren't just broken or knocked down, they're gone. The MCU has gone one better and gotten rid of the Avengers completely this time, though Sam appears to be trying to build them back again in the background. This is where Lewis Pullman's Sentry comes into things, with Val apparently using the character as something of a solo replacement for the entirety of Earth's mightiest heroes. He is billed in one of the Thunderbolts trailers as being more powerful than all of the Avengers combined. However, he is then portrayed as the villain, with the titular team having to come together to stop him. Of course, Sentry, a hero in the comics with powers comparable to Superman, will wind up on the side of the good guys eventually, similar to the arc of Will Poulter's Adam Warlock in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and will be a key part of the Thunderbolts, New Avengers, or whatever the team ultimately calls themselves going forward. Also, slight fanboy wish fulfillment here, but if we're throwing in Superman analogs into this bad boy, could we maybe get Hyperion for Secret Wars 2? I need him and Thor's last stand on the big screen, like, yesterday. Number 13, Joaquin Torres, aka Falcon. Thor, Sam Wilson, and Scott Lang may be the only confirmed characters in Doomsday that have officially been a part of an Avengers team before, but add in the fact that Shang-Chi's appearance may signal that Captain Marvel and the Hulk are still involved in some way, and you have 5. 6 if they extend an invite to Shang-Chi himself. Then there is Danny Ramirez's Joaquin Torres, who may not be an Avenger yet, but has received an invitation from Sam in Captain America: Brave New World. When the former Falcon stepped into the Captain America role, Joaquin stepped up into the Falcon role alongside him, and they worked well together as a team. In spite of neither of the duo having superpowers, and though Torres wound up in critical condition in hospital, they held their own in their fight above Celestial Island in Brave New World. It seems that Sam is surrounding himself with good people that he can trust, with Falcon right there next to Winter Soldier. He will have a baptism of fire in Avengers Doomsday for sure, but he knows what he's signing up for. Number 12, the Red Guardian. There have been multiple different super soldiers to have populated the MCU over the years. Of course, there is Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes, those that Zemo killed in Civil War, as well as Isaiah Bradley, who previously tussled with the Winter Soldier. Then there is David Harbour's Alexei Shostakov. The Red Guardian was essentially the Soviet Union's equivalent to Captain America, and though things didn't work out as well for him, he never lost his confidence, his pride, his strength, or even his humor. You can tell that he and Yelena spent a lot of time together. He will also reappear in Thunderbolts before reconvening with the team in Avengers Doomsday, and already has a great dynamic with Yelena naturally. However, it could be his relationship with Bucky that steals the show. Both are super soldiers, and if their buddy comedy-esque episode of What If is anything to go by, they could be a lot of fun together. Alexei may bring to the table a lot of comic relief, but he is a far deeper character than just humor. Number 11, M'Baku. As said before, Shuri will not be the only Wakandan present for Avengers Doomsday. Had she been the sole name from Wakanda Forever to have been announced, then you could argue that she may be trekking away from her home for the fight. Add in Namor, and you have even more reason to believe a portion of the film at least will be set in Wakanda. If that wasn't enough, how about the appearance of the King of Wakanda himself? After leading the Jabari tribe from afar, distancing them from the rest of Wakanda before Killmonger and Infinity War united them with the rest of the country, Winston Duke's M'Baku took the throne at the end of Wakanda Forever. A fierce and fearless warrior, M'Baku knows how to protect his own people, and will likely have developed a strong working relationship with Shuri as the Black Panther since coming into his rule. Quite how he deals with Namor is another question. But aside from his political and regal stance, never forget that he charged against Thanos step by step next to Steve Rogers on the front line, and will do the same against Doctor Doom when the need arises. Number 10, Ghost. Marvel Studios has been guilty all too often of pitting its heroes against underwhelming and/or undeveloped bad guys. This was absolutely the case in Ant-Man and the Wasp, as the titular characters went up against Ghost, a villain with an interesting concept, but poor execution. When Hannah John Kamen was confirmed to be returning for Thunderbolts, there was certainly intrigue, but it wasn't until the first footage of Ghost in the trailer that it became clear just how wasted she was in her MCU debut. In several seconds of trailer screen time, she did more to be excited about than 2 hours in 2018. Though she played the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp, she was desperately in need of help, thanks to a lack of quantum energy. The post-credits scene saw Scott head into the quantum realm in order to help their new friend before he was stranded as Thanos' snap turned Hope, Hank, and Janet into dust. Understandably, Ghost was seemingly forgotten about when he returned 5 years later, so it'll be interesting to see what state she's in at the beginning of Thunderbolts, and how that evolves into her appearance in Doomsday. Number 9, Loki. Loki has died many times before, with his death in Infinity War technically being the last one. However, his past pre-redemption arc self was sent onto a wildly different trajectory when he escaped from Stark Tower in Avengers Endgame. Now, after taking on He Who Remains and the TVA in his own show, and ultimately stopping multiple Kangs from wreaking havoc on the universe, Loki literally holds the timeline of the MCU in his hands. Though, with incursions and multiversal crossovers coming in the very near future, it would seem as though that grasp is not quite as solid as first it appeared. To see the return of Loki as the overseer of the sacred timeline is exciting enough. And as such a powerful character, he will no doubt have a huge role to play in the upcoming fight. However, a reunion with Thor simply needs to happen. the sun will shine on them again. And on TV. That's an aha reference. Number 8. Professor X. How do you follow a name like Tom Hiddleston on an Avengers cast reveal? How about with Patrick Stewart? Like Loki, Professor X has died multiple times on screen. See X-Men The Last Stand, Logan, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and also like Loki, his appearance in Doomsday is more than welcome. Along with Beast, Charles Xavier is one of the only X-Men to have appeared in the MCU so far, though his time didn't last exceptionally long. He was Earth 838 Professor X, who was part of the Illuminati and was quickly killed by Wanda Maximoff in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This won't be the same version of the character, but there's no real telling right now which version it'll be. There are big gaps in Fox's X-Men story, with the entire timeline being wiped out in Days of Future Past, then nothing between Dark Phoenix in 1992 and when Wolverine returned from the past, and only spotty accounts of what happened between then and the events of Logan. This is more than likely to be yet another new version of the character, and one that hopefully won't die this time. Because, you know, I think we've maybe had enough Professor X deaths to last multiple lifetimes at this point? I don't know. Number 7. Magneto. When the names of Kelsey Grammer and Patrick Stewart were announced for Doomsday, of course there was excitement. However, these are two names that have appeared on the MCU's credits before. Fantastic news, absolutely, but seeing Ian McKellen's name took things to a completely different level. McKellen has not made an appearance as Magneto since Days of Future Past in 2014, and his name on the back of that chair signaled the true return of the X-Men. It'll be incredibly interesting to see what kind of take they have for Magneto this time, since there is such a wide range to choose from. In the Fox timeline, Eric Lensher began as an X-Man himself and best friend of Charles Xavier, before going on to form the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and start a war against humankind. After the timeline retcon, he became one of Apocalypse's 4 Horsemen. However, by the end of Dark Phoenix, he was still on speaking terms with Charles. There is no way of knowing what Magneto went on to do from there, because as we all know, well, Dark Phoenix was bad, and no other main timeline X-Men movies got made afterwards. So, even if the Doomsday version of Magneto is the one we all know and love, he may be a completely different character by now. Or if it's a different variant of the villain, there's no reason why Marvel Studios shouldn't bring him in as a version of Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's father. Only time will tell. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler has been something of a strange entity during his on-screen career, and if you can detect a slight note of anguish in that sentence, it's because he's my favourite X-Man. He was one of the highlights of X2, with the White House scene in particular standing out, before being absent from The Last Stand, due to Alan Cumming not wanting to go through the makeup process all over again, which, yeah, fair, looks like a right faff if I'm being honest. Kurt Wagner was then played by Cody Smith-McPhee in Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, and the character was an incredibly popular addition to the recurring roster for X-Men 97. That 9 blades moment makes me ascend each time. All that to say, it's been something of a mixed bag for Nightcrawler over the last several decades, but its return has the potential to be epic. The character was sort of forgotten about after X2 for a while, and with the aforementioned gaps in the X-Men lore, we could be in for absolutely anything. Advances in CGI will likely make the makeup effort for Alan Cumming less arduous, and will also present the opportunity to show off Kurt's unique teleportation powers like never before. If Marvel gives their CGI artists enough time, but I digress. Number 5. Mystique. You could argue that no member of the X-Men was portrayed as differently or had their story changed as much after the soft reboot as Mystique. Rebecca Romul's iteration of the character was something of Magneto's right-hand woman, whereas in First Class, it was revealed that she was all but family to Charles Xavier. She flirted with the life of villainy throughout Days of Future Past, but ultimately stayed by Charles' side until her death at the hands of Jean Grey in Dark Phoenix. The inclusion of Mystique makes the X-Men here Very intriguing indeed. In theory, this all but confirms this will be a new X-Men team. Since Mystique died in the 1990s, while Charles Xavier still looked like James McAvoy rather than Patrick Stewart, there's no way she could return with the team as old as they will be in Doomsday. Yeah, characters have come back from the dead before, but Raven was impaled and unquestionably killed. It's far more reasonable to assume that this will in fact be a new version of the X-Men, which may go a long way to explaining the omission of the likes of Halle Berry Storm, Famke Janssen's Jean Grey, and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Number 4. Cyclops. There are plenty of actors that have been brought back to comic book characters after many years to finally be given their flowers. They may not have been appreciated at the time, but these returns can mean everything. There were plenty of these in Deadpool and Wolverine. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man No Way Home return was a key example, and if you want to step into the Star Wars universe for a moment, which, hey, I'm not gonna judge, there is also Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader. Avengers Doomsday could be the chance for James Marsden and Scott Summers to experience the same opportunity. Cyclops is a fantastic comic book character, and in both X-Men the Animated Series and X-Men 97 was the badass leader of the team. In the Fox movies though, both James Marsden and Ty Sheridan's versions underwhelmed. The former was little more than a pain in Wolverine's neck, while the latter was more a secondary character to Jean Grey's arc than his own. With potentially no Wolverine or Jean Grey appearing in Doomsday, Scott needs to stand up as the leader of his team and truly stand out as closer to an animated version than any previous live-action Cyclops. Number 3. Gambit. Though he was stuck in the void in his MCU debut, there is no question that Channing Tatum's Gambit escaped with his life in Deadpool and Wolverine. There was a scene released after the film that showed him survive the battle in Cassandra Nova's compound, and then turn around to a glow of a sling ring portal ready to take him out of the void. The scene did actually feature in the film on a TVA screen at the end, which just about makes it canon for this version of the character. Since he, in theory, had the power to go where and whenever he wanted, it could be this same version of Gambit along with the new X-Men, or it could be another variant. Either way, one thing is for sure. He made a name for himself, and then some. Hoo boy. Number 2. The Fantastic Four. No, having the Avengers and the X-Men finally cross over isn't enough for the 5th movie. Throw in the Thunderbolts? Nah, still not enough. Throw in the Fantastic Four, and well, you got yourself a stew going. Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Eben Moss-Barack have all been officially confirmed to return to screens for the second time in Avengers Doomsday. Of course, right now, there is little and less known about the MCU's version of the Fantastic Four, though what we do know for sure is that the story will be based in the 1960s, proving that the incursions that are about to take place care about time as much as they care about space. You've got all kinds of different dynamics to look forward to here, from Reed Richards meeting the rest of the super intelligent superhero community, to the potential beginnings of the Illuminati that won't get killed in a matter of seconds by Wanda Maximoff. And hey, how about exploring the history between Sue Storm and Namor? Reed, I'm sorry to say, dread it, run from it, Destiny arrives all the same. The Fantastic Four First Steps doesn't release for another few months, but you will likely see a post-credit scene lead straight into Avengers Doomsday, currently slated as the next film on the MCU slate, in the same way that Thor Ragnarok saw Thanos arrive in a precursor to those harrowing opening moments of Infinity War. This would suggest just how important Marvel's first family will be. And number 1, Doctor Doom. Well, this is the big kahuna. It all leads to Doom, and you could argue that the success of Avengers Doomsday hangs on nothing more than a single casting choice, which, putting aside my biases for a second, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Marvel Studios took a risk hiring Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark all those years ago, and have potentially taken an even bigger one this time around. Infinity War was unquestionably Thanos' movie, while the same will surely be said about Doomsday and Victor Von Doom, a character who has had about as much luck on the big screen as the Fantastic Four. Appearing in both the Tim Story iteration of the franchise and Josh Trank's infamous reboot in 2015, there is yet to be a version of Doom do the character justice in the live-action realm. Is RDJ the man to change that? Well, the Oscar winner is reportedly very heavily involved in creating the backstory of his character, something that will have to explain exactly why Doom looks the same as Stark. As a Doomhead, I hate this, But hey, maybe out of all the timelines where RDJ gets recast as Victor Von Doom, maybe this'll be the good one. Maybe. Either way, it would be a huge surprise if he didn't show his mask in First Steps in some capacity. Most likely the post-credits scene to set up the 5th Avengers film, already mentioned, before taking center stage in 2016. This will be the beginnings of a story that will see Doom rule over a world comprised of jigsaw pieces made of the remnants of different universes, depending on how closely Jonathan Hickman and Asad Ribich's masterful Secret Wars comic is actually followed. If done right, then hey, the MCU might be back.